Elias Thorne sat in the shadows of a kitchen that felt like it was slowly dissolving into the damp earth. The walls were weeping with moisture, and the flickering bulb overhead hummed a low, mournful tune that matched the rhythm of his own heartbeat. His eyes were red-rimmed, fixed on a pile of hospital bills that seemed to grow taller every time he looked away. Each paper was a death sentence for his hope. His daughter, Clara, lay in the other room, her breathing a fragile, whistling sound that tore at his soul. He was a man who had given everything, and yet, the world demanded more. He had worked multiple jobs and sold every possession of value, but the debt remained a living thing, a shadow that grew longer as the sun of his life began to set. That afternoon, the mailbox had offered something impossible. Among the final notices sat an envelope of heavy paper. Inside was a credit card, unlike any Elias had ever seen. It was matte black, absorbing the light, with his name, Elias Thorne, embossed in shimmering gold. There was no logo, no bank name, only a small note. Spend without limit. The cost is elsewhere. He laughed, thinking it a cruel joke played by some bored stranger. But as he ran his thumb over the cool surface, a strange, rhythmic heat pulsed through his fingers, as if the card itself possessed a heartbeat. Desperation is a powerful catalyst. With a shaking hand, Elias took the card to a high-end restaurant blocks away from his slum. He ordered a meal he could not afford, and a delicate wooden doll for Clara. When the waiter took the card, Elias prepared his apology, certain the machine would reject him. Instead, it stayed silent, then hummed a satisfied tone. Approved. The surge of adrenaline was intoxicating. He walked home with a hot meal and a gift, feeling a spark of forbidden hope. It was the first time in years he did not feel like a ghost in his own life, and the ease of the transaction felt like a personal miracle. The weeks that followed were a blur of transformation. The decaying apartment was traded for a glass-walled penthouse that touched the clouds. The best specialists were flown in for Clara, their fees paid with a single, effortless swipe. Elias did not stop there. He became a ghost of benevolence in his old neighborhood, clearing the debts of the single mother on the third floor and the elderly man who had shared his bread. He felt like a hero who had discovered the loophole in a cruel universe. Wealth, he realized, was not just power. It was the ability to rewrite reality itself. He watched Clara's cheeks regain their color and believed he had finally won. To celebrate Clara's recovery, Elias hosted a lavish gala. The room was filled with the scent of lilies and expensive perfume. Among the guests was Marcus, Elias's oldest friend. As Elias held a glass of vintage champagne watching the city lights, he felt invincible. But then, the music seemed to sour. Marcus, who had been laughing moments before, suddenly clutched his chest. His face turned a ghoulish gray as he collapsed onto the marble floor. He looked as if something invisible was being drained from his marrow, his skin tightening over his bones in seconds. In the chaotic aftermath, Elias retreated to his office, his hands trembling. He pulled out his phone and opened the card's dedicated app. He had never checked the balance, but the screen did not show dollars. It displayed a digital ledger of human vitality units. Every purchase he had made was listed, and the cost was measured in years and health. He saw the entry for the penthouse, equivalent to the collective dreams of a city block. He saw the entry for the private jet, equivalent to the physical fortitude of a lifelong friend. He noticed the timing of Clara's recovery. It aligned perfectly with his largest purchases. He had not been saving her with money. He had been trading the lives of others for her survival. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Elias stared at the screen, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The luxury around him suddenly felt like a tomb. A notification pinged on his phone, the sound sharp as a razor. It read, "Current balance, infinite, next payment. Due, the heart of the provider." Elias Thorne gripped the heavy kitchen shears until his knuckles turned white, his breath coming in jagged, desperate bursts. The matte black card sat on the cold marble countertop, looking innocuous yet utterly mocking. He slammed the steel blades shut, but they simply slid off the surface as if it were diamond-hard glass. He tried fire next, holding the card over an intense blue flame until his own fingers blistered, but the card remained cool, its gold lettering shimmering with an unnatural light. In a fit of blind rage, he hurled the card from the glass balcony, watching it vanish into the city smog. He turned back to the room, shaking, only to find the card resting quietly inside his leather wallet on the side table. It was a tether he could not cut, a shadow he could not outrun. Then came the maintenance fees. Elias attempted to stop spending, locking himself in a darkened room, but the system possessed its own horrific momentum. He watched through the penthouse windows as the park trees withered and turned to dust in a single afternoon. The vibrant street life of his old neighborhood turned a sickly, ashen gray. Small businesses shuttered without warning, and people he once knew began to walk with a listless gait as if their very purpose had been evaporated. The card was taking its due from his surroundings, a parasitic drain that no longer required a physical swipe to function. The air grew thin and metallic, tasting of copper. Clara, once the radiant light of his life, had become a hollow stranger. She sat silently amidst a mountain of robotic toys and silk dresses, her eyes vacant and flat like polished obsidian. When he tried to hold her, she felt like marble, cold and terrifyingly distant. The joy he had purchased for her had been stripped of its human essence, leaving only the physical shell of a daughter. In this suffocating silence, Julian Vane appeared. He did not knock. He simply stood by the windows, a man who looked like he belonged to another century, dressed in a suit that seemed woven from midnight. Vane, known as the Collector, spoke with a voice like dry parchment. He explained the cruel alchemy of the infinite account. Wealth was never created, only converted. Every dollar spent was a day of stolen laughter, or a year of potential happiness harvested from the souls of those Elias held dear. The most cutting blow came when Vane revealed the ledger's hidden history. Elias's father, a man remembered only for his absence and the crushing poverty he had left behind, had once held this same black card. The payment for his father's secret luxury had been the very childhood Elias had endured, the hunger, the bitter cold, and the desperation. He saw the ghosts of his father's decisions in the way Clara tilted her head, a mirror of a man who had sold his son's future for a comfortable present. This was a generational curse, a debt passed down through the bloodline like a terminal disease. Driven by a frantic need for redemption, Elias launched the Thorn Foundation. He poured billions into global hunger relief, thinking he could buy his way back to a clean conscience. But the ledger reacted with a savage irony. The more he spent on good, the larger the payment required became. The city began to buckle under a localized economic collapse. Banks failed, and a mysterious lethargy struck the workers. The cost of his benevolence was the ruin of the very people he aimed to save. The toll became agonizingly personal when Marcus finally passed away. The digital ledger pulsed a deep, rhythmic red. Payment processed, Marcus Reed. Transaction, pediatric heart reconstruction. Elias collapsed, realizing his friend's life force had been the specific currency for Clara's surgery. He was no longer a father or a hero. He was a parasite in a designer suit, feeding on the vitality of his community. Vane stepped closer, his shadow stretching across the floor like a dark stain. "The account is overdrawn, Elias," he whispered. "To keep Clara's heart beating now, you must make a purchase so vast it will bankrupt the souls of this entire city." Elias stood before the digital screen, the light flickering against his sunken eyes. The choice was a jagged blade held to his throat, cold and unyielding. Julian Vane leaned against the mahogany desk, a ghost of a smile playing on his bloodless lips. The offer was devastating. $1 billion injection to save the city's hospital, which was hemorrhaging lives due to the economic collapse Elias had triggered. But the price was the total erasure of his daughter's memory of him. To save the children, he would become a ghost, a man whose footsteps would leave no mark on the sands of time. He paced the penthouse, his footsteps echoing like a hollow drum. Every attempt to find a loophole, to donate anonymously or structure the funds, was met with cold, digital refusal. The system was rigged toward suffering. It thrived on the specific, intimate pain of the giver. Madness seeped into his mind. He spent nights screaming at the matte black card, demanding it take him instead of the world. Then, a clarity born of despair took hold. He realized the card was a contract of exchange. If it could take life force to create gold, it could do the reverse. He didn't want to spend any more. He wanted to settle the account. Elias drove to the heart of the financial district, where a skyscraper of gold leaf stood like a needle piercing the gray sky. This was the bank's physical manifestation, a silent, windowless monolith. He walked through doors that opened without a sound, entering a lobby outside of time. Julian Vane was waiting in the center of the vast marble expanse. "I want to buy it all back," Elias said, his voice cracking. "Every soul tied to an infinite account." Vane laughed, a sound like dry leaves. "The price, Elias, is everything you are. You won't just be forgotten. You will be undone." Elias didn't hesitate. He pulled the card from his wallet, its gold lettering glowing with hungry light. He swiped it across the pedestal, whispering, "Purchase the end of the debt." The world shuddered. A wave of heat radiated from the card, and the wealth began to dissolve. The gold leaf on the walls peeled away like burnt skin, turning into gray ash. Outside, luxury cars rusted into scrap in seconds, and penthouses crumbled into skeletons of old brick. But as the wealth vanished, a miracle occurred. In the hospital wards, patients felt an electric rush of warmth. The lethargy that had plagued the city lifted. The stolen vitality was flowing back to its owners, a tide of life returning to the shore. Elias felt a searing pain, a sensation of being hollowed out, as if his history were being scrubbed from the fabric of the universe. He found himself standing on a familiar cracked sidewalk. He looked up at the window of a modest apartment. Through the glass, he saw Clara. She was healthy, her cheeks flush with natural pink. She was laughing, playing with a wooden toy. Elias felt a surge of joy, but when their eyes met, his heart shattered. There was no spark of recognition. To her, he was just a stranger in a tattered suit. He had paid for her life with his existence in her heart. He returned to his old, decaying apartment. The luxury was gone, replaced by the scent of damp wood and old paper. On the floor lay a hand-drawn picture Clara had made, a crude drawing of two figures holding hands. It was the only thing of value left, a reminder that precious things carry no price tag. He walked out into the cold drizzle, penniless and forgotten, but free. As he turned the corner, a young man stopped him. "Sir, I think you dropped this." In his hand was the matte black card, the gold name already shifting. Elias looked at the man's tired eyes and felt a wave of pity. The cycle hadn't been broken. It had simply found its next victim. Elias said nothing, walking into the fog, leaving the young man to hold the infinite weight of his own future.